And welcome back to our continuing coverage of remembering former President Jimmy Carter. Thanks for being with us. I'm Jennifer Bellamy.
And I'm Ron Jones. And of course, we have our former anchors here today, Jeff Hollinger and Brenda Wood as well. We really appreciate you guys giving us the perspective of what's taking place in the nation's capital.
Yeah, I'm glad Jeff is joining us. You're a walking textbook of history.
Oh, certainly.
Encyclopedia.
Stop, Brenda.
Right, you are amazing. You're always giving us context from a historical point of view, which really is so valuable at a time like this.
And again, we're watching live from the nation's capital. Jeff, we know that you were talking with us earlier in the day as former President Carter moved from the Carter Center to the Air Reserve Base here in Metro Atlanta and now to D.C. What are your observations and your remarks?
You know, I love the tradition, and I think everybody loves the formality of all of this. And you know, the Carters came into Washington, D.C. in 1977, and they were sort of the anti-Richard Nixon, anti-Gerald Ford, anti-LBJ crowd, where the presidency was seen as this sort of regal place where they ascended to this unique place in American history and American society. And that's still true, but the Carters came in and they shattered the ceiling of what was to be expected in terms of doing things. And you guys just mentioned it a moment ago, where in '77 during the inauguration parade they get out of the vehicle, and that was a shocking development at the time. There's that famous moment when President Carter and Mrs. Carter come over to Willard Scott, who was broadcasting for the NBC Today show, and came over to him, and it was like a moment that everyone was stunned by. That
probably including Willard Scott.
Yeah, right. and you can see it on YouTube, and you'll see just what a moment it was, because Nixon didn't behave in such a way, and past presidents were somewhat inaccessible and didn't do things like that. And the Carters did those things.
The Carters ruffled a lot of feathers because of that. They didn't play politics the way previous presidents had played it. They were just regular folks. They didn't want all the trappings of the White House, as you indicate. And that didn't always sit very well with members of Congress. They like having the taking the position of being important and being higher than others, and all of the regalness that comes with that. The Carters didn't play that at all. They wanted to be ordinary people, and I think members of Congress found that mystifying.
And there's a famous story about that in a small way, which I think serves somewhat as a metaphor of what 1977 and 78 looked like, that there was a breakfast for Tip O'Neill, the House Speaker at the time, and other influential American members of Congress, and breakfast had been eliminated for them by the Carters. Instead, it was just coffee and a cinnamon roll. And
you're right.
And Tip O'Neill was furious. He goes, "Not doing any business until the breakfasts come back."
Well, President Carter and Tip O'Neill had a contentious relationship. Quite a bit. Tip O'Neill just thought he wasn't formal enough. I think he regarded him as sort of just a country bumpkin to some degree, and so he was not cooperative very much with Jimmy Carter as Carter tried to pass legislation. And Jimmy Carter read that, as being uncooperative, and so there was a lot of sparring back and forth.
And also from that state was Senator Ted Kennedy.
Senator
Kennedy and Jimmy Carter were at war. I mean, they loathed each other.
They did.
And as we watch this procession, we want to take you to our Faith Jessie. She is live for us from Washington, D.C., just outside of one of the public entrances of the state capitol, which is where this procession is headed right now. Faith?
That's right, Jennifer. We are here on East Capitol Street, right across from Shakespeare Library. Behind me, a small group of people starting to grow by the minute, awaiting. A lot of people hoping to get a glimpse of that casket. Not sure if we're going to see that from here, but we do know that this is the entrance. Once these gates open up, the public will be able to come in and pay their respects to President Jimmy Carter. We do know that before that, around 4:30, we're expected to have that service. Senator John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, House Speaker Mike Johnson, and Vice President Kamala Harris all expected to deliver eulogies, and then a small private It's time for President Carter's family, his friends, those who worked with the administration, for them to pay their respects as he lies in state, and then it is going to open up to the public. Things have been shifted back. I've been speaking with people as well as security out here because of the weather conditions. Everything shifted back. News did not necessarily make it around to those who were traveling here. So that's why we're actually seeing some crowds. People thought that they were actually going to be able to get in right now. That is being pushed back a little bit. But as you see cars behind me, these streets are clear. Salt has been put on the ground. The snow has been shoveled away. Extra barricades have been put up for security. And they are just awaiting their chance to say their goodbyes. We did get on the ground and speak to some people coming all the way from California to Arkansas to right in our home state of Georgia and beyond. I spoke to a gentleman who came here from South Korea and people who lived during the Carter presidency and those who were just know him from their parents or their grandparents or history books, all of them pointing to a similar theme, that he was a people's guy. He was down to earth. He's the peanut farmer from Georgia. When he was president, he wanted to be with the people. And during all of our coverage, even the processional that is expected to go down Pennsylvania Avenue, I believe that could be happening right now, alluding back to what Jeff was saying, to what Brenda was saying, that iconic moment during the inauguration when they decided, no, we're not going to be in this limo. We're going to get on the ground and we're going to be with the people. Mr. Carter and his late wife, Rosalind. A man of the people. That is the theme that we're seeing out here tonight. And people are just very excited to be able to be here, to witness this. Some people came specifically for this moment. Some happen to be in town with family as the holidays are ending. New Year's is just wrapping up. And they found out that this was going on and they said, I cannot miss this moment. I am so happy that I'm here to see this. So that's what we're seeing right here. Just a lot of love from both sides of the aisle. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody in between said that Mr. Carter is a great man, and they are just really happy to be here. So that's what we're seeing right now in D.C. These gates are set to open in just a couple of hours.
Reference, Faith with the reference to William Shakespeare, and certainly what comes to mind is the quote, heavy is the head that wears the crown, from Henry IV, and certainly this is applicable as you see Jimmy Carter in Washington, D.C., and his head was heavy at times with dealing with what he had to deal with in the late 1970s in Washington is unfathomable to a lot of people with inflation. You're still suffering the Arab oil embargo from 1973, talking about high interest rates as far as mortgages go, certainly the rise of Islamic fundamentalism in the Middle East with Iran, and it was a time that was a brutal time in American history. I'm not sure anyone could have navigated it without getting bruised.
And that's what I have gathered from the people that we've spoken with who worked with him in his administration and expert observers, who really say, that very few, if anyone, could have navigated that and come out successfully on the other end, having won re-election. That just was not likely. The circumstances of our time and in America at that time were just so very difficult to overcome. And some of it, for those who really follow this sort of thing, they blame some on Carter. Not every president makes all the right decisions. Everybody fails somewhere along the line during the administration. But some of it was, he dealt with the cards that he handled, the cards that were dealt him, if you will. And so, he did what he could, where he could.
And we're post-Vietnam right through there, too.
Yes, right after Vietnam.
There was just so much tumultuousness in
the all-volunteer army had kicked in, Ron?
Yeah, that's right.
As well?
Yeah, that's right, because the Vietnam War had just ended in 1975. Then we switched to the all-volunteer army. I'm not quite sure when the draft ended. And I was
I am. I'm old enough to remember. I didn't have to go. Thank you, President Ford. I'm always grateful for that. 1975.
75. Okay, so that's when the Vietnam War ended. I raised my right hand in 1976.
Mine is a generation that provided no service, the first one in the history of this country.
Yeah, there you go. But just think about that. the Vietnam War was the most unpopular war in American history. One of the most, because you had the media that was engaged in all of that. And then you had the recession. You had the long lines at the gas pumps. You had all those things that he was dealing with. The Iran situation where they took a bunch of American hostages before President Reagan actually moved in or was sworn into office, and then they released the hostages. So he had to deal with all of that. I would think, I mean, what do you guys think about this? I would think the burden of all of that he had to go through during those 4 years would make you just want to just kind of go off into the sunset and forget about it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's too much. It is too much to bear, as you just quoted from Shakespeare. You know, heavy as they. It was a lot for President Carter. I wonder, how the history books will treat him. I think his administration will get another review in the context of what all was going on, and that perhaps his presidency wasn't as failed as it appeared at the time.
There's a famous line from Richard Nixon who says that history changes in terms of how you're viewed when you outlive all of your critics.
Yeah.
There you go.
And certainly
100 years.
Jimmy Carter at 100 years can claim victory
and
on
had
that.
so much. I mean, he had nearly a half century of doing something else besides the presidency and making a global mark. On this planet, doing tremendous things. That has to factor in.
We talked with Professor Ken Stein from Emory, who is a legend, who was with President Carter in the years after the White House, and he told us the story that in 1981, when the Carters came back to Georgia, there wasn't really a clear plan for what the Carter Center would be or what his life was going to be, but it sort of turned on a dime with a handshake with then President James Laney, of Emory, who is now 97 years of age. And that handshake sort of opened the door toward the affiliation with Emory and ultimately the Carter Center. I always wonder, and this is something that certainly I think a lot of people have thought about, had he had a second term, what would his post-presidency have looked like? Would it look the same way that it has, or might it have been different?
Good question. I think there were a number of initiatives that President Carter started that he didn't see completed before he had to leave office, and some of those things were given credit to Ronald Reagan instead. But those successes credited to Reagan. Those initiatives had begun during the Carter administration. So who knows?
That's something we likely see with a lot of presidents, something they start that they don't get to necessarily finish.
A lot of times revolving around the economy.
Yeah, and when the effects take place, there's another person in office. But I believe that a lot of the Carter's legacy will be their post-presidency.
Yeah, I
think
agree.
so many people just think of all of the work that they have done. We talk about, riding off into the sunset after this, but they really went to work serving others, not just here in Georgia, not just across the U.S., but across the world.
Brenda was in the middle of all of that in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, absolutely.
A decade ago or so. I mean, I thought your reports here on 11 Alive were amazing. They were astonishing in terms of what they were doing to try and stop blindness.